What exactly is a true calling and how on earth do we find it? Join me, Annabelle Beckwith, as I speak to numerous women who are on that very journey and from whom we can all learn how to find our own true calling. Hello and welcome to True Calling. The theme for today's show is Rediscovering Yourself. And my guest is Fiona McKinnon. Now, Fiona started her career, dare I say it, in the last century, in the very earliest days of digital media. And being in the vanguard of that meant that she was flying all over the world. She was at the cutting edge of digital media design and technology. She was involved in some of the world's biggest and most respected organisations, making global decisions, travelling all over the world. It seemed that she had it all, the high-flying career, until it all came crashing down, until she suffered physical burnout and had to stop and reevaluate what was genuinely important in her life. And it was that having to stop that caused Fiona to rethink where she was going and to re-examine what her true calling was, and in fact, as she explains herself, to rediscover her true calling and rediscover herself. Let's hear her story now. Welcome to the show, Fiona McKinnon. Now, Fiona has had a remarkable career. Back in the day, she was working for Fortune 100 companies, traveling all over the world. And to anybody looking in from the outside, it would have appeared that Fiona had it all figured out, was living the dream life. And yet now Fiona is doing something really rather different to what she was doing back then. Fiona, tell us your story.
Well, firstly, hello, and thank you, Annabelle, for this wonderful opportunity to talk. So I started in online advertising back in 1999 when it was new media. And quite frankly, we were all just making it up as we go along. It was a very new industry. It was a very thriving industry. And I had a wonderful opportunity to work in that startup environment. So there was a little bit of pull your sleeves up and just get on with whatever you had to at that time, because we were all learning and exploring. So I quickly moved through an ad technology foundation where I knew absolutely nothing. I studied geography and economic history at Glasgow University, so absolutely nothing to do with marketing, nothing to do with technology, but I just found myself in this space with curious people that wanted to make a difference and wanted to create something new, and that's where I got that energy to work with startups in that environment. I'm very fortunate that early introduction to the industry has meant fast forward 23 years and I'm considered a bit of a veteran. I've been around a long time, seen a lot of things. And I've been so fortunate that experience has taken me all around the world. So I moved from Scotland to London, lived there for many years, ran a European business at that time. So I was back and forth to Germany and France. And then I moved to Australia and set up, was part of a startup team in Melbourne with a large US business. Running a global role from Melbourne is quite challenging, both in terms of distance to the rest of the world, but also time zones. So after a period of 3 years where I was never at home, I decided to move with the organization to Los Angeles, to be closer to Silicon Valley, to be closer to production and tech and the hub of a more kind of central time zone. From there, I then moved to Canada and spent a couple of years in Toronto, again, helping a startup business expand into North America and then also in the UK. And it was around that time, so in 2014, that I suffered from complete burnout and exhaustion. And when I reflect back on it, it wasn't 2014 that was the problem. It was probably 14 years leading up to that, of not being able to say no, of feeling that it was my my duty, my honor to be at every meeting, to get on every plane ride, and to be there and to be visible. And I wanted to be like, let's face it, feeding the ego. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be part of the decision-making team. We can go into some of those boundary issues in a moment, but I really felt that, that was what career empowerment and being part of that top table was all about. So when I suffered that burnout in 2014, it was a physical burnout, and I was forced to take a period of time out. And then I went into consulting. So I had this little message, inside my head saying, I think you just need to take it easy for a little bit, maybe just, work on your own terms. And I have a lot of experience that I want to be able to share in the industry. I'll consulting, which then led me to work with companies such as The Guardian, the FT, Reuters, and CNN, working on a project for them. And then I was seduced into going back full time and working for CNN for a big Turner project that they had, because I was missing that team connection. I wanted to feel that I could make a difference, and I enjoyed the team that I was working with. So I went back to CNN to work full time. But I felt at that, about fast forward 2 years, and it was the end of 2019, I could feel that burnout creeping up again. I could feel that there was a disconnect from that corporate world and where my recovery from burnout was beginning to take me. And I took the decision to resign and to move out of the corporate world again at the end of 2019. So I guess I'll take a pause there as that's kind of where I guess the change element comes in. But as you can see, it's not just a moment that makes the difference. It's also the time leading up to it. And actually, perhaps I should just say what I do now.
Yeah, that'll be good.
That would be helpful. So I'm the co-founder of a wellness and performance coaching business called Moment Company. And we help companies really understand, and individuals really understand, what it means to have good well-being in an organization that allows people to thrive and really helps that sustainable high performance, because we can't be asking people to perform at their best if we're not willing to invest in them and their, you got to have a good foundation to build a tall house. So let's look after the people in your organization, and those people, if they're healthy and happier and making better decisions, that's good business. So that's what I do now. I'm a performance and well-being coach.
Right, brilliant. There's so much in what you just said there, and I'm trying. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I didn't want to distract myself by writing notes, and I was just thinking, I hope I can remember all of this. But going right back to the very beginning, where you said you were there at the start of this growth industry, but back in the late 90s. It was all just kicking, all just beginning, and I love the way that you said we were all kind of just making it up as we go along. And I think sometimes we're all of us just making it up as we go along. We can plan and we can think that we know what's happening, but all of us are work in progress. All of us are kind of laying the tracks as we move forward. But also interesting that you said at that point that you had surrounded yourself with people who had the same sense of curiosity and wanting to make an impact and so on. So I'm sensing that even in those early days, before the whole burnout scenario and the direction in which your career took you, there was a calling there to be curious, to be exploring, to be creating an impact, and so on. So when did it start to go a little bit sour?
So there. There's always the I say there's always the phrase. It's a phrase I use where you never regret moving somewhere and changing something. Actually, I should say I never regretted moving or changing something. I regretted staying too long. And I think that when I reflect back on the moments that caused me the most anxiety, the moments that contributed to my stress, and I was very angry all the time. I had a very kind of when I look back now, I was carrying such a lot of stress, and it's because I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't have the toolkit to know how to express my needs more. And that's not about saying I want, I need. It's about just being okay saying yes and asking another question. It's about saying, you know, I have a boundary and here's my line. And that the minute you start to do things that don't feel comfortable to you, that's when you start to build up these stress and anxiety around that. When I reflect back, there were moments throughout my career that were the breadcrumbs of where I was ultimately heading to that burnout. A big part of me and who I am now is that I'm 4 years next month sober.
Oh,
so living in an advertising startup, young, vibrant tech kind of environment and client facing meant that there was a pressure around socializing, around taking clients out, around drugs, around alcohol. And I realized that they were hiding and also contributing to my kind of continued little drip feeding of stressful moments, of anxiety, of fear that then was manifesting itself in how I communicated. And I wasn't aware of those. It would take a couple of people sometimes to kind of hold a mirror up, and you kind of get that jolt of, oh gosh, that's deep down not who I am. Oh, something really out of alignment here. And that's only with the tools that I have now, and by being sober, that I can reflect back on all of that. So unfortunately for me, it took complete physical burnout. I had the norovirus twice. I had E. coli. I had Giardia, all within 8 months. And my immune system just went
to pieces. Yeah.
Oh, and I was training for a marathon in amongst all of that as well. And
let's run 26 miles on top of everything else.
And living in between New York, or flying in between New York, Toronto, and London on like a monthly basis. And I wondered why I collapsed. But really, it all starts here. So although my body was the physical manifestation of my burnout, my mindset was that I got to keep going because people will like me. I got to people please, people will like me, and I'll get more of the top table invites if I just say yes to everything. And Fee, will you chair the meeting, but also take the minutes, and can you pop off and get us a couple of coffees while you're at it? Yeah, of course. You know, it's just setting those boundaries. Now I realize is where that journey kind of took me.
Yeah. Absolutely critical. And again, just to pull that apart a little bit, I think many people find that they are struggling to say no, because as you just said there, if I say yes, people will like me. Or if I say yes, I'm going to be meeting the expectations of other people and doing what I think that they think I should be doing. And we tie ourselves up in knots, trying to please everybody. It just doesn't work. It's a very human thing to do. We want to be liked. We want to be part of the social group because that's who we are as a species. But this critically important thing about setting your boundaries is something that I'd like to explore. And I think it's also some of my guests have sort of said that, like you, it was this kind of slow burn. It was always there, and then suddenly it became apparent as life said, "No, stop, just stop." And here it is. Here's the thing, just in case you miss it, Fee. It's here.
No, I'm not going to let you. I'm literally going to pull the rug away.
It's literally just stop and have a look. Sometimes people can have a bit of a sort of Damascus, like, oh my goodness, it's this. I have been. It's a bit more of an aha moment, but with you, it was this kind of evolving thing. And what also interests me is that as you're saying yes to your true calling and what you feel you are drawn to do and what is best for you to build yourself and build other people, because the old cliche, you can't pour from an empty cup. It has to be about you and your mindset first and foremost. As you are saying yes to this, you have to be saying no to that. There's the dividing thing. So one of the things that you were saying is I was just saying yes to everything because I quite liked it, all of these invitations. So there's a bit that I thought, oh, go me, I've got a seat at the top table. But that wasn't necessarily to your better good. But this whole business about choosing what to say yes to and deciding what to say no to and setting those boundaries, where has that played out in your own life? Like, what started to happen when you started to go yes and, as you said a few minutes ago, or actually no? And how has that how has that played out in what you're currently doing, and how you enable other people to find their voice and find their vocabulary, and be able to set their own boundaries and find their own way forward, their own true calling?
Right, where will I start?
I know, sorry, that was like this. I've got a really bad habit. I'm a terrible host. I ask about 4 or 5 questions.
Well, I would say that just to kind of play off that there wasn't a single moment, I would also say that there is no single cure.
Yes,
and actually prevention is better than cure. And when we're talking about changing direction or paths, it doesn't indicate that you just get, we don't have ruby slippers and we just get to the end spot immediately. We go step by step.
Yeah.
That's how you get to where you're going. It's not, there isn't a magic carpet. So I kind of reflect on that. And I would say that, and that fits with prevention being better than cure, is that I started to take small steps. And for me, my small step from that 6 to 8 weeks of physically not being able to do anything.
Yeah. Wow.
And a friend locking me up in her house to make sure I didn't try and still run the marathon, was that I started to read about kind of the connection between mindset and physical illness and exhaustion. And interestingly, I'm actually doing a bit of exploration in a course right now on tiredness. And one of the key manifestors of tiredness is people pleasing. It is the number one. There are other facets here, but the number one is when we give our energy to somebody else. Can you imagine? It's literally leaving your body and you give that energy to somebody else the minute you say yes to something you don't want to do, just to make somebody else happy. So you're just depleting yourself every time you do that. And so to answer your question of when was, how did I feel that change? It was the first couple of times that I said, no, that's not for me, or no, I don't want to do that, or no, I can't do that, or I'd love to help, maybe this other thing, or I can give a portion of my time to something else. And I just didn't say yes to absolutely everything. And it felt really empowering, because the more I practiced it, the more I realized it didn't impact the relationship. In fact, often it can improve it, because you have an expectation that therefore is managed.
Yes.
And what I found burn me out, stress me out, cause my anxiety was that people pleasing, when I felt I then couldn't match the expectation of both what I'd set and what I believed the other person to be. So by being really clear on what I could and couldn't do, getting congruence back from the person that, that's okay with me, I was like, that feels easier and lighter. Perhaps I could do this in more areas of my life. And the way that I got to that point was learning meditation.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Learning just to quiet my mind, to quiet that, and just take a fraction more of a second just to think, how do I feel about that? Does that make sense to me? So that was the kind of action that I took, was to learn meditation, transcendental meditation. And then the practice of it was in learning to understand if a yes felt right or if a no felt more easy for me, and then being okay with my decision, and then setting the expectation with the other person of what they'd heard my yes or no actually meant to them. So that was kind of what I practiced and continue to practice now. And you know what it's like yourself, you say yes to going to a party and you don't really want to go. And then you feel bad about cancelling last minute, and you've created a whole series of anxious moments when you could have said, no, sorry, I'd love to, but I can't make it. That was easy.
Yes, how easy. Yes. And I love what you say about taking a moment. So meditation practices, and for me, I find, I meditate not perhaps not effectively, but I make a point of sitting quietly and meditating on a daily basis, but also during the day, just taking a moment to just like stop for a second and think, just tune in. It's almost like tune in and recalibrate. So whether I'm thinking, I'm imagining or registering the chair holding me up and my feet on the floor, I'm registering something physically, or something that's taking me away from the stuff that's going on, just to center myself for a moment. But as you more eloquently expressed, it's this kind of listening to that inner voice and checking with yourself, how do I feel about this? Not the logic of, well, I really ought to do this because that'll give me a seat at the top table and I'll be popular and they'll invite me to the next meeting. But how do I feel about this? And I want to link that back to something you said earlier in the conversation when you were telling your story. And you said, I had a message that maybe now I ought to stop. And Tell us a little bit more about that message and your ability to hear your inner voice, because with the whole true calling piece, it's going to be something that you feel and that you intuit. It's not necessarily going to be something that you go, right, first of all, I'll do this. It's not really a head thing, is it?
No. And I think that's what the lesson of meditation and mindfulness have taught me. So I can come into the difference between meditation and mindfulness. And I'm doing this because they are terms that are often interwoven or interchangeable, but actually they're the complete opposite. So meditation is a sit-down practice. It's formal. It's something you would do like, a yoga class, or you're like, I'm going to meditate right now, set my timer, off I go. Whereas mindfulness is dynamic. You can be mindful in absolutely everything you do, from listening to talking to drinking a glass of water, going for a walk, running, cooking, whatever brings you joy, you can bring mindfulness to that, because it just means about being focused 100% on a task in hand, without judgment and without distraction. And they're the two important things. So when you're not judging yourself, when you're not judging your thoughts, you're just going, okay, I'm thinking that today, cool. Then you start to kind of have a different perspective on the stories that you're telling yourself, but you also have a different perspective on your communication that's coming into you as well. And the beautiful thing about that is that it has a ripple effect. So the more mindfully I speak, I engage, I am with someone else, the more our interaction will change. It just has to. It's the way that we work as humans, that interaction, that's changed forever by the fact that I've stepped in with a different energy. So when I talk about I had a message, you're right. It can be verbal. It can be something you say to yourself. However, I've just recently been on a generative coaching course, which is amazingly transformative. And it encourages us to think about not just what's in our head, but how does our body feel? We've got this huge tool that we use from there down, or we don't use from there down, that is telling us so much about our day, how we feel about things. And so let's use it more. So, we use hand gestures. They can tell us so much. Our somatic gestures tell us what a person's truly feeling. If they go, yeah, it's fine. Is it? That doesn't look right to me. So it's about tuning into how your body feels, picking up on the kind of signals that we're emitting all day long that aren't just verbal. So, I feel it in my body if I say yes to something that I don't really want to do. So I don't know if that answered any of your questions.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that whole thing of like go with your gut, and there's an increasing amount of research that shows actually there are sensors within the gut, and so much of our health is based in the gut. And whereas in the past it was just a go with your gut, but think it through logically, and there was a cerebral bias, and think it through, logic, order. And whereas increasingly now research is showing there's a different side to the story here. And I know this is going to sound really flippant, but for me, it's kind of a way into this kind of sensing, does this feel right or does it not feel right? And if your gut is going, don't go there, then, listen to your gut. At least don't plow on regardless of it. And
your gut.
Yeah.
Is kind of like your risk center, if you want. Yeah. It's saying danger, or this feels safe.
This feels safe, yeah.
But you can also use this, because this is our values, our heart. So your gut, if you think of your gut as your risk center, but if it comes from your heart, it's based on your values, it's your true self, this feels right. We use words to describe what we're expressing in our body. So that's how I would distinguish. And then, you're right. logical. And then how do I actually do this?
Yes. Yeah. So it all combines. But I remember, like, when I was very small, I probably still do this now as a bit of an admission. I'm at a restaurant. I can't decide between two dishes. So I would literally do a kind of, like, I've narrowed it down to two. Eeny, meeny, macaroni, that one. And if I felt a fraction of a second of disappointment that my choice had landed on that one, I knew I was to order the other thing. And I've done that since a child. Now, that is such a facile thing. But it's also that kind of, it's like, if it's a, then think again whether that's what you want. If it's a, oh, good, then I know it's, but it is, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but it's a similar kind of thing. And obviously when it comes to really important decisions, therefore, not just whether as a child I had fish and chips or a burger, but actually tuning into that. Does this uplift me as I take this step forward? Or is it something where I'm thinking, or is it something where I'm thinking, yeah, that's nice and it's interesting, but it's somebody else's dream, it's not mine. If there's the slight thing where it's like, yeah, that would be great, but it's not my dream, as you say, check to see how much energy you're going to give that to someone else. And I love that turn of phrase there. How much energy do you then choose to give to somebody else, probably with the best of intentions to help them reach their aspirations and their true calling, but it might not be yours.
Exactly. Yeah. And also something I learned as part of that journey, which was not something that I had done previously, was to ask for help. Because I felt that in order to be this, exec and doing all of these things and be seen in a certain light, and because of my people pleasing, I always felt I had to be the person that asked that asked, can I help you?
Yeah.
And then I was the giver. But actually what I found over time, that once my battery was depleted, then, and I'd nothing left to give, I didn't know what to do with that. And a friend turned around to me and said, ask. Because actually other people want to help you, but by always saying no, or by not allowing people to help you, you're depriving them of what fills their bucket. So ask and accept. And that when I reflect back on, was probably a really game-changing moment for me, was when I realized that there was empowerment in asking for help, because the other person wants to. And so it's a win-win situation. No one's losing when you ask for help. And I think that really shifted something in me as well.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Fiona, as you're sort of working on your true calling, working in this way? What's next for you?
Well, I was reflecting on this morning, and that kind of changed direction, because I'm sure to many people it sounds like I've completely gone on a different path. But actually, what I believe I've done is I've become more of who I always was. I'm just more of who I actually am. I'm on a growth journey. I'm not on a path changing direction. Actually, my path's just got bigger. So what I'm doing now is, with my business partner, Alex, at Moment Company, we're using the experiences that we have. So he is from a Marcom's digital project management background as well. He suffered his own version of burnout. For him, it was short-term memory loss. And we've put all of our learnings, our experience, our training around NLP, generative coaching, breath work, mindfulness, and meditation. And we've put all of that together to say that we can help companies and organizations recognize the current situation within their business, because it's impossible to move forward if you don't know where you are today.
Where you are now. Yep.
We go in and we help organizations really kind of get to the root of what's going on in your organization today. How do people feel about how they're performing? How do people feel about how they're protected and their well-being is fostered within the organization? And how can we create a path for growth for the business via the people who support your people? So I guess we're the people who support the people who support the people. And we have a program of performance and well-being, which is a mixture of workshops. It's a mixture of one-to-one coaching, and then all kind of encompassed under a framework of measurement and recommendations back to the team on what they can do to kind of build their skill set. So we talk about mindset because that is the place to start.
Yep.
In NLP, we call it coach state. So if you're not starting from a place of being connected to yourself, you're not aware of how you're feeling, you're not grounded, then how can you expect to grow? So we need to kind of teach ourselves how to get into that coach state and not be in a crash state, which is the opposite, where you're trying to create chaos. Funnily enough, when you create from chaos, you get more chaos. So we do workshops around mindset and really help build organizational culture from the ground up. Brilliant. And we do it in our old ad sector, so ad tech. So that's kind of how our two aligns and paths.
Oh, yes.
Because we understand the organizations, we understand the pressures, we understand the nimble, agile nature of that industry, and we adapt that terminology in what is a more well-being, to some, a little bit woo-woo, I admit, but it's how we all work. So we just kind of find a way to translate those two worlds together.
Perfect. And I love what you say there, like two things, just to kind of wrap up there, where you say you support the people who support the people who support the people. And it's what that said to me is like the ripple effects of what you're doing. So the ripple effects of your experience are really far reaching. Like you will be impacting people directly and indirectly, or indirectly, I should say, who you will never meet, but that ripple effect goes out. And also just to kind of wrap up, I love what you say also about it was always there. It was always there. It's not like you've been going, whoa, suddenly somewhere else. And to me, that points to, in finding our true calling, it's not just, discovering something new. It's letting go of things that we aren't in order to become closer and closer to who we really are and what we actually have to bring to.
I feel it here when you say that. I check in when you said that. I checked in on where I'm feeling that, and that comes from the heart. And just it is more of what I used to love doing, which is mentoring, being in a young environment, helping people grow, seeing, giving people their first opportunity in the industry, and now they're senior vice presidents of big companies is my greatest joy and pleasure. And so I just want to share more of the good stuff that can help people grow themselves. So I really feel that. So thank you for saying it that way.
No, and it's also just the joy that, it's written all over your face as you do that. And this is something that's so in keeping with so many of my guests, that when they're talking about what they do and what they love about it, they are beaming, they are glowing. And that is what finding your true calling and following it can do for you. Yeah. Fiona McKinnon, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Oh my, what can we all learn from Fiona's experiences and from the insights that she has gained on her journey towards her true calling? I really like her refreshing honesty, where she says right at the start, we were all making it up as we went along. Friends, let me just let you in on a secret here. Everyone's making it up as they go along. Nobody has it all figured out. Everyone is kind of on the hoof, making it up as we go along. One of the things that Fiona says, and our conversation became really, really profound, more than I had expected it to become. One of the things she talks about is tuning into that inner voice, in creating the space, in Fiona's case through meditation, in creating the space to actually hear ourselves, to be able to intuit, to be able to tune into what our inner voice is trying to tell us. And in following that inner voice, that's what made the difference to Fiona. That, and understanding where her boundaries were. I think so many of us fall into the same trap that Fiona did, of saying yes to everything, because we want to appear busy and important, because we don't want to let people down, because we feel obliged to help people, and yet, saying yes to too many things can lead to burnout and can lead to us saying no to our true calling because we're so busy doing other stuff. It's a careful and important choice to make. Friends, whatever you're doing today, Choose to take steps in the direction of your true calling.